It is your Thursday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Happy to be back for another day. Really good show coming up today. Excited to bring you this one. Piper Ritter, head coach of the Gophers softball team, should join me here in just a little while. Gophers heading out to Seattle, Washington. Actually, they're probably there already right now. Talked to Piper Ritter the other day for this segment, just kind of talking about her journey to become the head coach. She's a former player for the team as well. She was the pitching coach for quite some time. Tons of success in that realm. And this year, Autumn Peace, excellent Gophers pitcher, named Big Ten Pitcher of the Year. That was last week. So a lot of really good things happening for the Gophers softball team, and had a chance to catch up not only with Piper Ritter, but to talk to another player as well and kind of get some perspective on kind of what the whole season has meant to this team and what this program is really striving to do. So stick around for that in a little while. Got some Vikings stuff at the end of the show. We finally know the details of the Za'Darius Smith trade and the impact on the salary cap. Got some NBA thoughts towards the end of the show. Jimmy Butler, draft lottery. My mind's been going all sorts of places these days, so I hope so. Bear with me. The show's a little bit all over the place, but it's focused. It's focused at the same time. Have some Minnesota United stuff here in just a minute. They finally won a home match first, though. What did I miss? We're going to start with the Twins again just because they keep playing interesting games. And in this particular game, it was a story of some injuries that are, that could be, one of them certainly serious to Nick Gordon. I'll talk about that more here in just a little bit. And some concerning things with Jorge Polanco and Joey Gallo, more so Polanco with his hamstring than Gallo fouling a pitch off of his leg. But the big story in this game was the bullpen. It was a familiar theme from last season, but not so much from this season. And before I even get into that, I got to play the sounder.
Time to check my social media, yeah.
To see who loves me online.
Hashtag blessed life.
As the game was happening, got this message from a reader/listener, Harold. He says, let me find it here. I had it pulled up. We're blowing another game because Baldelli's use of relief pitchers is inexplicable. He can win with slugging, but he has no idea how to manage his bullpen. Now, no names were named, but I imagine this was mostly in regard to Emilio Pagan, who did not have a very good game in this game. That is an understatement, but has actually been pretty good this season. Now, Pagan will be the first one to say, and even said in the post game, hey, how I've been throwing doesn't really matter right now. Paraphrasing right now, how he's been throwing right now doesn't matter. He didn't have his good stuff in this game, and that was an understatement. He had a couple of walks, then gave up a grand slam, came into the game with the Twins ahead 3-2, 2 outs, first and second, then the 2 walks, and then the home run. Next thing you know, it's 7-3, and next thing you know, the game is over. Next thing you know, the Twins have lost the series, lost the game. Two winnable games that got away from them. The one on Monday with all the frustrating twists and turns and the calls from the umpires, and this one, of course, where they led, they battled back. They were down, 1-0, 2-1, came back to take a 3-2 lead, but then gave it all back in the 7th inning. But the bigger point here is that Pagan actually had been quite good this season. I think reading Phil Miller's story, he'd only allowed 2 of 15 inherited runners to score this season so far. He, had I think I saw on Twitter the other day, I think it was Nick Nelson that tweeted this, does a good job writing about baseball. I think he tweeted that the Pagan was number 5 among American League relievers in FIP. So he's been pretty good. I know they haven't used him in the highest type of leverage situations, but he's been pretty good for them. So the point here is this. I get it. We like to gripe about Rocco Baldelli's use of the bullpen. He lifted Sonny Gray after just 4 innings in this game, although there were 4 rather laborious innings. He only gave up 2 runs, but he needed 84 pitches to get through those 4 innings, did not have his sharpest stuff. But maybe that set them up to have to use certain guys. Now, I guess the gripe could be you didn't have to use a ton of your best relief pitchers on Tuesday. I know they went through a lot of guys the game before that. But on Tuesday, they didn't have to use a whole bunch of their ace relief pitchers because Bailey Ober went 6 innings, and then they got Stewart, Moran, and Jax. They didn't have to use Lopez, didn't have to use Duran. So there was there could have been a case that those guys could have been available in this game to come into a situation like the 7th inning where that's the ball game on the line. Especially with the off day coming today before they play the Angels, there is an argument to be made there. The other side of the coin is Pagan's been pitching pretty well, right? He's been doing well this season. You bring him into that situation, then you've still got potentially those other guys to get through the 8th and 9th, and I'm guessing that's maybe where the thought process was. Baldelli basically saying that he thought that was a good spot to bring Pagan in. It just didn't work out. And that sometimes is the way it goes, right? You make a move that looks worse in hindsight. People have all sorts of scars from Pagan last season. We gave up all those home runs, blew all those saves. This was his first blown save this season, first home run he's given up all season. So I get it. I get both sides of it, but I also think it's a little bit unfair to question Baldelli in this case because Pagan had been pitching pretty well, because he was a good choice in the moment. It just didn't work out, and sometimes we question outcomes more than we question strategies. Now, the big problem in this game is Nick Gordon, like I said, broken bone after injuring himself on Wednesday, so that's going to be something they have to deal with, and then we'll see how serious the injuries to Jorge Polanco and Joey Gallo are, but both guys had to leave the game. Gallo sounds like it's more like a bruise, so hopefully that's not a long-term thing, but a hamstring for Polanco. This team can't afford a whole lot of offensive setbacks. This is a team that's been having a hard enough time scoring runs in general this season. It's been better lately, but in general this season, especially with the bases loaded, they failed again in that situation in this game. They're now 5 for 40 this season with the bases loaded. They've not had a hit with no outs and the bases loaded all season long. That would solve a lot of their problems as well. Might not even had to get to any kind of high leverage bullpen situation if the hitting had been better in those situations. But larger thing is I want to see how they come through this with their depth, with their hitting, if they can make up for the absence of these guys however long they are out. That to me is the bigger picture thing. Pagan's going to be okay. He's been okay this season. And, sometimes, like I said, you can question the bullpen usage, but sometimes questioning outcomes instead of strategies is a dangerous path to go down. And speaking of struggling on offense, Minnesota United got 1 goal, but that was all it needed in Wednesday night's Major League Soccer match. They finally win a home MLS match, beating Houston 1-0. Bongi Halongwane with the only goal for Minnesota United, but they made it hold up in that 1-0 win. Important for them. They hadn't won at home in a regulation MLS match all season long. That's a tough way to live. Their defense had been porous lately after a really good start, even though just the 1 goal, a really nice finish from Bongi, and they got to sing Wonderwall at Allianz Field. Now, the big thing in this one, too, is that they still are in pretty good shape in the Major League Soccer standings. I was just taking a look at this. Even with all the losses at home, that was a big one because Houston was right there with them in the standings. They're now 7th in the Western Conference. That would be playoff position if the season ended today. It certainly does not end today. They were about a third of the way into the year. But even through all of their stumbles, even with Emmanuel Reynoso missing all these games, and he's back off suspension, by the way, not playing this week, but we'll see when he's able to get back onto the team and contribute. Even through everything they've dealt with, they are in a playoff spot right now. A pretty impressive feat considering everything that has been thrown their way this season.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake. With 24/7 gaming, the good times never have to end. And you can satisfy your cravings at our restaurants and bars. Or relax in one of our luxurious hotel rooms. Those that play together, stay together. And don't forget to join Club M so you can spark new memories and bask in the rewards along the way. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
Let's just spend a little bit of time right now appreciating the Gopher softball team. They made the NCAA tournament every year that it's been held since 2013. I was out at the softball complex on, I think it was Tuesday, I guess, this week, talking to head coach Piper Ritter. I'll play that in a little bit here, that interview with Piper Ritter, former player for the Gophers, by the way, a great pitcher, back in her day. Piper Martin was her name back then. That was about 20 years ago that she was dominating for the Gophers back then. But since then, has become the pitching coach and now the head coach for the Gophers, really spanning a lot of the success they've had. Three Big Ten pitchers of the year during that time, including this year, Autumn Peace being named to that honor not that long ago. Previous to that, they were awarded 2 other times with that honor. So, it's just pretty impressive that they've been able to do what they've been able to do. And obviously so much of that is predicated on pitching in college softball. And like I said, 3 Big Ten pitchers of the year. Sarah Groenwagen actually won it twice, 2014 and 2017. Then Amber Pfizer in 2019. That was the year the Gophers went all the way to the college softball World Series. And like I said, Piper Ritter, a part of that success along the way as a pitching coach and then taking over as head coach in 2020. That said, I feel like this program is maybe a little bit underappreciated. We know a lot about the success of a lot of these teams at the University of Minnesota. I think the women's hockey team gets a lot of acclaim. I think the women's volleyball team gets a lot of acclaim, and rightfully so. Those teams have been to Final Fours, won national championships, things like that. On the men's side, we celebrate a lot of their successes, especially the men's hockey team and some of the other quote unquote minor sports or Olympic sports, however we want to classify them. The baseball team has had some success, although not so much in the last couple of years. Softball team, I think, has carved out a pretty impressive niche, not just at the University of Minnesota, but kind of nationwide. We did a story at the Star Tribune recently about the growth of college softball on TV, how it's very widely viewed, how if a few years ago I believe it had higher TV ratings than the college baseball World Series, things like that. It's just a very well-watched sport on TV, and at the U, it's done quite well. You go to a game on a nice spring weekend, which really have been few and far between this year. And unfortunately for them, a lot of April was not so nice, and that's when they have a lot of their home Big Ten games. But they can put a lot of fans in Janes H. Cowell Stadium when it is a nice day, when it is the team going well. And this team has been going well for the better part of the last decade, actually more than the last decade. Just really a consistent winner. Starts with pitching, starts with kind of the identity of the team, and starts with a lot of what they've kind of grown from the ground up to the point now where they're a perennial NCAA tournament team. That's just impressive to me. I just wanted to shine a little bit more of a light on it, kind of give some perspective before we get to my conversation here now with Piper Ritter, the head coach. All right, really happy to be joined by Gophers softball coach Piper Ritter. A lot of success again this year, Piper. The team started out, it didn't maybe seem like it was going to be your year, but things just kind of progressed to the point where now you're in the tournament for every year since 2013, and that snuck up on me a little bit. I'm sure it didn't sneak up on you guys, but how have you been able to sustain this level of success at this program?
What happens in the beginning of the year, we do schedule a pretty tough schedule just so we are ready for the postseason and ready for down the wire Big Ten play. And so for us, how we start out is never indicative of how we finish. So our goal is to just keep getting a little bit better, and then just to play our best softball at the end of the year, because it is definitely a learning year. It's always you're learning what you can do, what you can improve on, and what you can get better at. And this team is a prime example. We started off, we had to figure out who we were and our identity of the team, and figure out our pitching circle, figure out defense, and then our lineup, which one works, and what we need to do to beat the other teams.
I'm big on identity. Are you big on identity when figuring out a team?
Yeah, different people make up the team, right? So I think that you can't be who you were last year. Every team's different. You might be a piece of that team, but every team is going to be different, and you can't try to be what you weren't or you were. And so for us, it's just finding what we're good at and being okay with, maybe our strengths aren't our strengths that were last year, but it doesn't matter because we'll have better strengths, and so for it takes a while to find that, you know what I mean? And if you're hot at the beginning, or if you think you've got everything figured out, I think in the middle of the season or when it gets hard, it's probably harder to figure that out. So it's nice that when we take our bumps and takes our bruises, it happens at the beginning of the year rather than at the end.
That's a good way to do it. You said you had to figure out the pitching circle. It seems like you figured it out pretty well. Autumn just named Big Ten Pitcher of the Year. She had another tremendous season.
What was the evolution of that like, and just the season that she was able to build?
For her, it was about being healthy. She's coming off an injury from the previous years, and it was about just managing. She did have an injury, she had a surgery, and so figuring out how to not pitch again, but it feels different. Anytime you have a surgery, it feels different. And it took her a year. It took her a little longer than she wanted to get back to pitching the way she wanted, but she's always had the mentality. And I think going through an injury and maybe being not able to pitch as much as she wanted gave her a little bit more new life on there, and she attacked batters a lot better. She didn't waste as many pitches, and I tell pitchers from the beginning, we don't want those wasteful pitches because they add up, and the other thing that they do is they let them see you a little longer, and she really she's owned in that, and I think she really understands that. So
you had your own standout career here back in the early 2000s. Was that the kind of pitcher you were, or do different pitchers have different identities?
Every pitcher has their own identity. For me, I think that some of the things come back and haunt me, like, don't let 0-2 pitches get hit. Some of those things I'm like, I feel like sometimes pitchers do things and I'm like, it's just payback, right? But I was probably different in some ways and the same in some ways. All the pitchers that I coach. The main thing is they're not cookie cutter. Every pitcher has their strength, and even the pitchers on the pitching staff, no one's like each other. So you've just got to build on your strength and know what your strength is, and know their strength is different than yours, and you're going to complement each other. So I think I'm really, really big on that, and just letting the pitchers own what they're good at.
You've been a common thread with a lot of the success that this program has had in the last decade, and even obviously before that when you were a player. And it's been different head coaches. Now you're the head coach. Before that you were the pitching coach. Through all these NCAA tournament appearances. How much fun is it to kind of see that kind of span of success, to see the different pitchers that have had success, and just to kind of think about what this program is, where this program is right now?
You always want to leave something better than when you got there, right? Yeah. And I think that's a prime example. When I came here, we were good, and through playing and through coaching, I was lucky enough to be under 3 great head coaches, and just seeing it's prideful, right? It's my alma mater. I want nothing but the best for my alma mater, and so it's kind of my dream job, because I every day get to make Minnesota softball the best that I can. And at the end of the day, you want to leave wherever you're at better than where you got there, and hopefully I'm doing that a little bit.
You originally came here from New Mexico,
yes,
right? Yes. How did that journey become, not just temporary but permanent? I mean, you've been here I know you had some coaching stops along the way before you got here for coaching, but like, to make this your permanent home, New Mexico is nothing like Minnesota, but this seems to be where you were destined to wind up to a certain degree.
I wanted to go away in college. That was my thing. I wanted to go away. I want to experience something different. Did I think that I was going to go away and stay away? Probably not. When you're young and you're 19 years old, you just want to go and experience. I wanted to do something different. I wanted to go play softball at the highest level that I could, and University of Minnesota gave me that opportunity. And for me, I didn't even know necessarily maybe until my senior year that I even wanted to be a coach, and even then I still wanted to go to postgraduate work. And so through that, I coached and did postgraduate work a little bit, and then I realized just coaching is where educating and being a teacher is where I'm at, and so coaching fit right into it.
How has your coaching philosophy evolved over the years? I mean, obviously from becoming pitching coach to being head coach, and just that journey along the way.
It's constantly evolving. I don't even know if it's there yet, right? I think when you become a young coach, you think there's one way to do something, and then as you grow and as you become a coach, you realize that the best way is the way that works for the student athlete, and then in your culture and in your environment. And so it's finding that, and hopefully working with it, and getting 23 student athletes to believe in what you can. And yeah.
Awesome. A couple more things for you, Piper, before we let you go. Let's talk about the journey, the more immediate journey, the super, the regional coming up here in Washington in just a few days. How do you kind of what kind of plan do you bring in? Obviously, Washington's been a very good team. McNeese State is obviously first on the calendar, so we don't want to get ahead of that. But what's the big picture kind of thought process and goals and plan going in?
It's always one pitch at a time. You're always going into someone else's house, and so you've got to be ready for it. You've got to be ready for it to be hard from the get-go, whether it's the first game you're playing or the second game you're playing. But that's what our preseason's like. That's what it's like for us. Majority of our season is being on the road, playing in someone else's stadium, it being uncomfortable. And so I don't think there's any other way to prepare us than what our season's built for. And so for us, it's just making sure that we play our best, not the best, just our best, and making sure that when the moment's there, we don't let it get too big and capitalize on it.
When you are at your best, aside from just playing a clean game, what is the identity of this team? What did evolve aside from the pitching that's been so good?
I don't think we give up. I think when we're at our best, whether it's in the circle, whether it's on defense, or whether it's on the plate, we're not giving up. When we're playing our best, we're right in there, and we believe it, and we fight like it's the last pitch, and we never give up.
Awesome. That's a good identity to have. Piper Ritter, appreciate your time. Take care. Good luck, okay?
All right, thank you.
The one thing Ritter did very well this past year, too, was work the transfer portal. Taylor Kraft, a transfer from Duke, was very, very instrumental in their success this year. A first-team All-Big Ten, hit 14 home runs from the catcher position. The receiver for Autumn Peace and her excellent season in the circle. Had a chance to catch up a little bit with Taylor Kraft after I was done talking to Piper Ritter. This was a question from a different reporter, but she was asked about kind of the expectations and kind of what she sees and what she's seen from Autumn Peace this year. Their excellent all Big Ten pitcher of the year.
It's honestly amazing. I love it because she just makes the batters look silly, and she's confident in herself. And I think it's just cool to catch someone who has so much confidence and poise like she does.
Now, a little later on, I was able to ask her a little bit more about kind of her relationship with Piper Ritter and kind of how she has fit into this team coming in as a transfer.
They made it easy. They didn't really, make it seem like I was new. They just coached me like they coached the rest of the girls. And I think also learning from the rest of the girls also helped as well.
And like we said, this is a team that's heading to Washington for the regional, trying to get out of the regional, not at home, trying to get out of the regional into the super regional for the first time when they haven't had the luxury of hosting. They've made some big strides in this program, but this would be another big one this weekend. Can they go through some tough teams? Starts with McNeese State on Friday, but obviously the big one will be host Washington. Can they get through this portion of play to get past that and get to a bigger situation where they have a chance to advance again to the College World Series? The program is certainly worthy of that. They've had the season worthy of that, and we'll see if they're able to extend it beyond this weekend. Now, speaking of extending a season, my goodness, the Miami Heat now winning Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals on Wednesday night. Remember, the Heat were a play-in team. They were the number 8 seed. They lost their first play-in game. They were the exact spot as the Timberwolves were this year. Won that last play-in game to get the number 8 seed. Then, of course, upset Milwaukee in the first round, knocked off the Knicks in the second round, and now have taken Game 1 off of prohibitive favorite Boston in the Eastern Conference Finals. A lot of it, of course, having to do with Jimmy Butler, the ultra-competitive former Timberwolves player. 35 points, 7 assists, 6 steals, and 5 rebounds in this game. Made a late three-pointer that helped seal the game. They win 123-116. I don't know what else you can say about this Heat team right now. They certainly were better than an 8 seed. They were 44-38 on the season, so a pretty respectable regular season. But the run they're on is just kind of unheard of in the NBA. You don't usually see, unless some team has dealt with a massive amount of injuries during a season and then a star comes back, you don't usually see a team that's just been kind of good but not great during the regular season all of a sudden start beating these teams in the playoffs. Usually the playoffs tend to go towards form. Not this year. Not with Jimmy Butler. He's a playoff guy. I hate to say it, but he was right. If they still had Jimmy Butler on the Timberwolves, if they'd found a way back in the day to make him happy and he was still here, trajectory of this franchise would be different. Now, it would be different in another way. I was struck the other day. It was Tuesday night. The NBA did the draft lottery drawing. Spurs getting the number 1 overall pick and presumably set to take Victor Wembanyama, the excellent once-in-a-generation talent out of France. Just thinking about lottery luck and kind of what it's meant over the years and how the Spurs have been particularly fortunate. Now, it's not like they've had all these swings at the number 1 pick, but just kind of thinking about it, especially in relation to the Timberwolves history, kind of got me down a little bit of a rabbit hole, so bear with me. Thinking about when they got the number 1 overall picks, they've had it 2 other times, 1987 and 1997. 1987, of course, they took David Robinson, number 1 overall. He was the consensus number 1 overall pick coming out of Navy back when, the center position was really a big deal in the NBA. He still would be a very high prospect in the NBA based on how he plays, his shot blocking ability, things like that. But just being able to get him into the mix, what that meant to the franchise at the time, and then 10 years later, getting the number 1 overall pick again, kind of coinciding with Robinson getting hurt. They played a year without him. Their record was bad. They get Tim Duncan, number 1 overall in 1997. Again, a consensus number 1 overall pick. Nobody thought anybody else should be taken really except for Tim Duncan. Both those guys go on to have Hall of Fame careers. You look back at those drafts, nobody in those classes is really even close. I mean, maybe you look at, a guy like Scottie Pippen or Reggie Miller in the 1987 drafts. Obviously great players in their own right, Hall of Famers in their own right, but neither one were considered consensus number 1 overall picks. That just makes it easy on you, right? It makes it easy when everybody is saying this is odds on, this is for sure the best player in the draft. And they got that situation again this year with Victor Wembanyama. Just nobody is saying take anybody else. Everybody is saying take the 7'2", 7'5", some people are saying, gifted ball handler, 3-point step back shooter, rim protector. He can do everything on the court. Take this guy. He is so valuable in the modern game. He can do so many things. Everybody's saying take this guy. This will transform the Spurs. So all 3 times they've had the number 1 overall pick, there's been a clear-cut number 1 overall selection. Now, that stands in contrast to the Timberwolves in a couple of ways. First, I don't think either year they picked number 1, which was 2015 and 2020. There was a clear consensus. I will say, I feel like the Wolves have done quite well for themselves in those drafts, but you remember 2015, there was some discussion back in the day of whether they should take Karl Anthony Towns or Jahlil Okafor. They end up taking Towns, and actually D'Angelo Russell, former Wolves player, ends up going number 2 overall to the Lakers. Full circle, he comes back to the Lakers this year in that trade. Okafor goes number 3 to the Trust the Process 76ers. Does not work out all that well. He was okay as a rookie, but he's not in the league anymore. So the Wolves did quite well to take Towns that year. He's far and away the player from that draft who has the best overall numbers, the best advanced numbers, things like that. So that was a very good year to have the number 1 overall pick, but they had work to do. They had to make the right pick. They had to know who they were taking. Now, 2020, same thing. A lot of discussion. Should they take Anthony Edwards? Should they take James Wiseman? Should they take LaMelo Ball? A lot of questions that year about who they should take, and I think the jury is still a little bit out, but I think they are very happy with the Anthony Edwards pick, making the All-Star team for the first time this year, on the cusp of maybe being a superstar, already a star in this league. LaMelo Ball, certainly a very good start to his career. Tyrese Halliburton, taken much later in the draft, maybe has the best overall numbers of all of them so far, but Ant certainly on an ascending path to be that superstar kind of player. But like I said, neither of those years was it easy on the Wolves. I think they did well in both those years. Now, where it gets dicey is the years where the Wolves had the best chance in the lottery and didn't end up with the number 1 overall pick. And I think of 2 years in particular where it would have been very easy on them to make the pick, but they did not get that number 1 overall pick. 92 is the one that hurts the most, obviously changed the trajectory of that franchise, had the number 1, had the best odds of the lottery going into the night, end up picking 3rd. Orlando jumps them. Charlotte jumps them. Orlando ends up taking Shaquille O'Neal. Charlotte takes Alonzo Mourning. Wolves end up taking Christian Laettner. The rest, as they say, is history. Another one that's maybe a little bit underrated, 2011. Wolves had the best lottery odds that year, but slipped to number 2. Kyrie Irving ends up going number 1 overall. Wolves take Derek Williams. Now, Derek Williams was the consensus number 2 pick that year. I remember that. A lot of people like to rag on David Kahn in retrospect. There's plenty of ways to rag on David Kahn, but that year, Derek Williams was the consensus number 2 pick. It just didn't work out, but that would have been very easy. Kyrie Irving was the consensus number 1 and has gone on to have a very, very good NBA career. So, just some perspective there on not only getting the lottery luck in getting the number 1 overall pick, but when you have that pick is almost as important as getting that pick. The Spurs have had that luck 3 times now where they've gotten the number 1 overall pick, and in all 3 instances there has been a very easy pick to make. Now, that does not mean that this is going to work out as well as Robinson and Tim Duncan. We don't know what Victor Wembanyama's ultimate trajectory is going to be, but right now everybody's saying best draft since LeBron James, best number 1 overall pick since LeBron James. That is lofty territory to be in. We'll see where he winds up. I'm just saying the Spurs, in addition to being particularly lucky this year, have had that luck throughout their history. Not a lot of number 1 overall picks, but the ones they've had, they have made count. All right, let's close that rabbit hole, finish with the cooler. We finally know some of the details of the Vikings trade with Za'Darius Smith and Cleveland. Sounds like the Vikings will be picking up a little bit of his salary this season, but not that much. This is reported by ESPN. They're going to pay a little over $1 million of his salary this year. They're getting some debt, $4.5 million in dead money, but they're getting about $10 million in cap savings this season. They put that to good use right away on Wednesday, by the way, signing first-round pick Jordan Addison. Those things are formalities, but they didn't have the cap space to do it before they made the Za'Darius Smith move. Ben Gessling writing about that in today's Star Tribune. Go check that out. So some of these moves they're now able to make. Jordan Addison on the books, Za'Darius Smith off the books. See what happens with Dalvin Cook now. Maybe another Dalvin Cook move could free up some more cap space, give him a little bit of flexibility to add a little bit more in kind of that second, third wave of free agency. We'll see what they do, but close the books, like I said, on Za'Darius Smith. We know what they got. $10 million in cap space to play with. They can sign some other players now, kind of leave a little bit of room, carry over to next year maybe, not be in this kind of dire situation all the time. Taking a little pain this year, it feels like, to maybe have some better years ahead. That will do it for me today. Will be a lot more Vikings talk coming up on Friday's show. Matthew Collar, who writes about the Vikings and podcasts about the Vikings at Purple Insider, will join me. He has written a book. It is not out yet. Football is a numbers game. It is about the history and the trajectory of Pro Football Focus. A really interesting book, really interesting conversation with Matthew Collar. Hope you will enjoy that on Friday's show. Until then, have a great rest of your day. Be back at it again tomorrow.